Hey everybody, what's up? It's Nick here, and in today's video I'm going to give you guys kind of a little Photoshop tutorial. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys my process behind making this image right here. So this is a little image that I've just had some fun playing around with. I wanted to make an effect as in I'm kind of like next to a creepy brick wall and I'm kind of undead or zombified as you're seeing here, and this is the final result as I have so far. Now this has just been something I've been doing for fun over the past couple of days whenever I have any free time. I took these images and I've basically just been playing with them as much as I want to in Photoshop, and this is the final result that I have so far. So I just want to give you guys a basic rundown of how exactly I did this, just in case you guys want to replicate or do something like this on your own. Now I used a whole bunch of stock media for this, and I'll have all the links to everything I've used in the description. And as you can see, this has evolved quite a lot throughout the past couple days. This was the first version, and this was the second version, and this is the final version. So I'll provide the links to all the stock we're going to be using in the description. For this, you will need a lot of grunge brushes, and here's a link to find a whole bunch of grunge brushes. These Valley of the Dry Bones Part 3, these are the ones that I've been using for the majority of this, creating most of the background type effects. And then I also have a whole bunch of doodles. As you can see in the background, I just decided to add some doodles. I don't know if they add to the effect or not, but I thought they were cool, and this is just what I wanted to try out. But again, this is just a work in progress. So I have a whole bunch of doodles here. I have a texture that you guys are going to need for actually making the kind of zombified look. And I think that's pretty much it. I'll have the links to all of these in the description. So let's start out by making a new document. And so I'm going to make it 1600 by 1200. That's perfectly fine for me. And now we're going to grab some of our source footage over here. So I'm combining two photographs in order to make this. I have this one picture of me looking all creepy, like I'm staring into your soul, or kind of. I really do not take a good picture of myself, if you guys haven't noticed. But this is the picture of me. And this is the picture of the brick wall. As you can see, it's quite a drastic change going from this to this. That's just how much Photoshop that we're going to be doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take our wall image and I'm going to open it up. As you can see here, this is the wall image we're going to be using. I took this as a raw file on my camera and then edited it a bit in Adobe Camera Raw, and this is the final result. So we're going to take the blank image of our wall and we're going to open it up and we're going to import it onto our main document. And I'm going to need to definitely resize it here because it's a bit too big. And we're going to resize it until we get something that we like. I want to just move it down a little bit. And so now that we have our background image in place, we're going to go to image adjustments and add in a hue and saturation change. And I'm going to drop the saturation all the way down. I'll try and change the hue a little bit. Maybe bump up the saturation just a little bit, and that seems fine. And we're just going to add a few little adjustments here to make it really creepy. So I'm going to make it, let's see what vibrance does. We'll make it a bit less vibrant. And the last thing I want to do is add some brightness and contrast. So I'm going to add a whole bunch more contrast. Yeah, maybe darken it down a bit, add some more contrast. And then there we go. So that looks a lot creepier than it did before. And that's actually a really nice effect that I want to pull off. And so now that we have our basic background in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in those kind of grungy lines you're seeing here in the back. So if I just hide all these layers except for the background, as you notice, we have a couple different layers. G1 and G2 here are the grungy layers. So if I just remove those, as you can see, it's basically just our blank wall. And those are the grungy layers. So in order to add those, that's where our grunge brushes come in place. So I'm going to create a new layer, make sure the foreground color is black and select the brush tool. And then we're going to go and select some of our grungy brushes. And now I have a ton of brushes, as you can see here. I essentially just downloaded a ton of brushes and started playing around with this. And that's how I got the effect that I did. So I think this is one of them. We're just going to click around and see if I can find a good place for that one. And that's good. One more down the bottom just for good measure, and that's what we have right here. Now you can see that looks completely sloppy and doesn't look anything like our final result. What we're going to do now is we're going to go up to filter, render, and then fibers. And then as you can see, it turns it into these kind of fibers right here. I'm going to zoom out, and those are the fibers that we're going to be working with. Now you can change up the variance and the strength. I'm going to keep them to around here for now, and we get something that looks like this. Now I'm just going to keep them around the center like this, and I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay, and that should make it look like this. And I'm going to lower down the opacity as well, just to make them blend in with the wall a little bit. And now as you can see, it's a bit more distorted and a bit more creepy, and it looks just plain awesome. Now for the sake of time, I'm going to just duplicate this layer, and then I'm going to transform it. And no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to rotate it and make it go horizontally. Now ideally what you're going to want to do is do another layer of brushes and make it differently, but for the sake of this tutorial I'm just going to copy the layer over and use this, and I'm going to make this one a bit more transparent. So now there's it without it and there's it with it, and so those are the kind of fibery lines that are adding that kind of eerie background edge to it. And now that's pretty much it for the background. Now the final thing that I did on the background was I added in a layer of black, and I grabbed an eraser, just made it a soft eraser, and I made it gigantic, and just added a bit of a border as soon as it loads up. And as you can see there, now we have a bit of a black border, making it a bit more creepy, bit more eerie. We can even lower the opacity down on that, but I think I'm going to keep it at 100% just for the sake of this video. And I'm going to add that all to a group, and I'm going to call it background. Yeah, there's our background group, and I'm just going to put all the layers in the background group there. And now we have the background group. We can ignore the rest of that for the rest of this video. And now we're going to move on to adding the stuff that's on the wall. So I made an extra group here called extra brushes, and that essentially is all of the doodles and all of the graffiti. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all these doodles and graffiti from the brushes that we downloaded, and we're going to put them on the back wall. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to copy and paste them from this layer over here. But just to demonstrate to you guys what these brushes look like, I'm going to go up to my brush tool, and I'm just going to show you what some of them look like. So let's just go down here, and I'll grab this building right here. That's one of the ones that I used down at the bottom, and as you can see, I just lined them up, and then I rotated and positioned them down on the bottom. And there's a few different things that we could do in order to make these have a bit more of a dramatic effect. We can once again change them to either overlay, screen, or soft light, any of those other layers. Or you could also do what I did for this tree in the corner. As you can see, there's a little bit of a tree over here with a swing, and what I did was I added a blur to that by going up to filter, blur, and Gaussian blur, and then I just blurred that a little bit, and I believe I changed the blending mode to that as well. Yeah, that's on overlay as well. And so essentially you just need to play around with the overlay blending modes, you need to play around with the opacity, and you just need to play around with putting the position of all of the different doodles until you get something that you like. And again, you don't need to use these brushes, you can find a whole bunch more. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the video, and then I'm going to come back when I just copied and pasted all of these doodles here. So I'll be back in a moment. So as you can see, I copied and pasted all of the brushes. Now I need to do a bit of fine-tuning with this because this background isn't exactly the way it was when we first had the other image, because once again, you're not going to get the same result every time when you do this. You're going to get something completely different, and that's why you should try and do it just a few times. So I think this actually looks a bit cooler than this one. I think it's because of the contrast that I did, but we're going to keep this. That looks pretty cool, and I'm actually just going to change it up a little bit and make it look like that. That looks a bit better. And now we're going to add the final touches, which is basically making me all zombified like this. So what you're going to want to do is take an image of anything that you want to zombify. I'm just going to use this image of me, and for the sake of this video, I cut me out of the background from here just because I've already made a video showing you guys on how to separate a subject from the background. So I'm just going to take me, I'm going to open me up, and I'm going to drag me onto this thing right here. Now ideally I should have shot myself in the same position that I took the picture of the wall, but we were on a hill and that was the bit of the problem, so we're just gonna have to deal with this for now. I'm gonna rotate and position myself towards the bottom. I think that's good. That's around the same position that I was before, and I'm gonna name this layer to no change just so that we have a bit of an idea of what layer is what. So no no change. And that is going to be our layer with absolutely no change to it whatsoever. So what we're going to do is duplicate that layer, and we're going to name this one to desaturate. So desaturate. And we're essentially going to desaturate ourselves on this level, but we're not going to do it just by going to hue and saturation. We're actually going to grab the sponge tool over here. So this is the sponge tool. We're going to set it to desaturate, and we're going to set the flow to 40%. And then we're going to grab one of our brushes over here, and we're going to do a few different passes with the brush tool. So as you can see, if I just zoom in closer, every time I move the brush tool, wherever I move the brush, it desaturates us. So we're just going to make a few different passes. Don't go completely overboard with the desaturation, because we're trying to make it look like we're undead or zombified. So just make a few parts of yourself a bit more desaturated than others. I'm just going to move over my hands right here. And also, something that I wanted to point out and mention while we're doing the desaturating is I have a few brushes in here just from my experience with Photoshop that are kind of blood splatter like. I won't add these in the description because honestly I can't remember where I downloaded them, but this is kind of a splatter brush, and if I click right here, as you can see, it kind of desaturates in a splatter pattern, and that can add to the whole zombification or undead theme. So let me just add a few over my nose. I'll add a few on my hands just for the hell of it. Again, don't go overboard. I'm kind of going overboard here, but that's because I'm rushed for this video. And that's what it looks like with the whole desaturation. Now I think I'm also going to desaturate that a little bit. I think that was a bit too much though. So let's grab something softer. Yeah, that's good. So that is our desaturation. And now what we want to do is we want to change our hue and saturation of this level. So make sure you're selected on the desaturate level and go to image adjustments and hue and saturation. We're going to drop the saturation down to around 20, or actually raise it to 20. We're going to change the lightness to -30, and then we're going to mess with the hue until we get something that just looks really weird. So I'm thinking there, that looks good. Now we can always go back and change this because it's going to look different whenever we put the concrete texture on it. So now we're going to do that. We're going to go grab the concrete texture. So go back to your files and grab the concrete texture that we downloaded from the link in the description, and I'm going to put that right on top of our image. Let me just resize that. I'm going to put that right on top of my head, and I'm going to click enter, and we're going to change the blending mode of this to hard light, wherever that is. Yeah, hard light. And that's what it looks like. Now, as you can see, that looks really, really freaking awesome when it's over our skin. However, we don't want it to be over everything else. We want it to be over our skin. So we're going to add a layer mask to that. And once we're on the layer mask, we're going to select the eraser tool. And I clicked the big eraser by mistake. Whoops. Okay, so enough with that. Just make sure to choose a smaller brush, and if you're selected on white when you have the layer mask, it will remove all different portions that you don't want. So you want to make sure it's selected on white, and then to just brush over all of the different portions of the concrete texture that you do not want. And if you accidentally screw something up and you want to redo it, just change it to black, and then that'll paint it back in. So I'm going to take this time right now to speed it up, and you guys can watch a time lapse of me masking out the concrete texture. Okay, there we go. We have the concrete completely masked around ourselves. Now I'm going to change the opacity of this to around 80%. That's cool, and I'm going to try and play around, see what it looks like with overlay. Huh. That actually looks quite different. Nah. We're going to change it back to hard light. That looks a bit better. And now I'm going to go back to our desaturate level, and I'm going to change the hue and saturation of it once again. And I think I'm going to change the hue to something a bit darker. Maybe down the saturation a little bit and up the hue. Or down it. That looks cool. And one final thing I'm going to do is go back to our layer with the concrete texture on it, and I'm going to lower the saturation of that down completely. Or maybe not completely. Maybe to just like that. that looks cool. And essentially that's it. Now we look all zombified, as you can see there. Now we can add a few different adjustments to this, such as making our eyes glow or adding a few things around, but that's essentially the basics of what I wanted to show you. Now if we go back to this PSD right here, as you can see, if I go to the me layer, I also have something called face splat, which if I just hide that, as you can see, it's just an extra added touch of grunge brushes overlaid over my face, and that's just something that I wanted to add in. But essentially that's basically it. That's how we came up with this effect right here. Now this is really awesome, but it's still a work in progress, and I thought I just wanted to share this with you guys. If you guys want to download the PSD for this, I'll leave a download link in the description with the PSD for this image right here, as well as the one that we worked on in the tutorial, just so that you guys can mess around with it and do something on your own. So that's essentially it. That's all I wanted to show you guys. Thank you a lot for watching. If you have any suggestions for anything you want to do in a future video, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. So that's it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.